The Half-Life series is home to many iconic yet terrifying creatures. Some of these formed naturally on their homeworlds. Many were developed by the Combine as biological weapons, workers, and soldiers. The worst, however, were formed as a side effect of a parasitic infection. With Halloween coming up, I wanted to cover one of the most uncomfortable and horrendous enemies that we encounter in the Half-Life series, a person whose fate may be considered even worse than the Stalker. Jeff was encountered during the 7th chapter of Half-Life Alyx. He frustrated and scared any who dared to attempt to pass him in an abandoned distillery. We do have to ask, what was his story? How did he become the way he did in a fate worse than death? How does his story end? And are there more like him in the Half-Life universe? In this video, we explore the lore and story behind Jeff. We all know the story of the invasion of Earth. The Combine Empire conquered the planet in a mere 7 hours and spent the subsequent decade keeping humanity in line through many barbaric acts. The Combine were a mighty and powerful force, and with their power and aim to control the human population, they constructed settlements across the planet to keep a close eye on them and break them down. While the development and construction of these settlements did allow the Combine the ability to monitor humanity, these enclosed regions also offered them another advantage. The portal storms that had allowed the Combine to conquer the planet also brought through other creatures from other planets. Each of these creatures also wanted to claim Earth for themselves, and some were very territorial. So the settlements protected humanity and the Combine units from the wasteland, as the many deadly creatures between the settlements claimed it for themselves. Although the Combine were a strong force, they too struggled to contain Xen's population. Antlions dug deep underground and built nests. They also ventured into regions off limits to them. To counter this, thumpers were installed that agitated their sensitive ability to detect vibrations, and headcrabs were noted to find themselves in the settlements in the search of a humanoid host to control. Overall, the Combine did a good job to keep these hostiles out through the use of their armed guards and technology. Within the settlements, the human population lived in fear by design to keep them compliant. They were monitored constantly, their food was restricted, and raids of their homes offered severe punishment if they were found in possession of contraband. A resistance did form in these early years, but if these thoughts of an uprising or action to rebel were discovered by the Combine, they were given the most inhumane punishment. A trip to Novr Prospect and turned into a stalker to work as a mindless machine for their oppressors. On the other hand, the Combine offered their newly conquered population a way to live a more comfortable life, a way to join the human arm of the Combine Empire in return for better housing, treatment, privileges, and additional food rations. The most documented position available was a place in the Combine's police force, the Civil Protection. There were, however, many other positions that the Combine hoped to fill in order for their settlement to run smoothly without issue. Within Eastern Europe, in the settlement of City 17, the Combine encountered a problem. They had attempted to control the spread of Xenian flora and fauna, but even their best efforts had failed. An entire region of City 17 slowly fell to an outbreak of alien origin, filled with dangerous and unpredictable plant life and hostile creatures. The Combine decided to seal off this section of the city in order to protect themselves and the rest of City 17. In order to deal with this problem in the quarantine zone and similar issues across the wasteland, the Combine offered a new role to those who would accept it, the role of a hazmat worker as a member of Infestation Control to remove and incinerate all traces of the Xenian infestation to stop the spread. Around 15 years after the Combine's arrival on Earth, through choice or punishment, several hazmat workers were sent out into the quarantine zone to clear out a distillery that had become home to a new Xenian infestation. Unknown to them, they would never return home. As the workers arrived at the Golden Lion Distillery, the hazmat workers installed quarantine force field checkpoints, prepared a cleanup solution, and began their work. They believed that these force fields would stop the spread of the Xenian vegetation, but they were so wrong. Within the tight hallways, Xen coffers launched out fungal spores out into the air in order to spread further into the region. Xen snappers bit at anything that came close to them. Barnacles latched onto the ceilings and waited for their next meal, and bulbous pustules leaked onto the ground. This was not the plant life humanity had on Earth. This was aggressive, and it wanted to feed and spread. This region alone was dangerous. The spores alone, when inhaled, allowed the spread and growth of seedlings. To protect themselves from this, their hazard suits had an air filtration system with an independent air supply. This should have been enough to protect them from these dangers, or so they thought. During their time here, something went very wrong. A hazmat worker's suit could have been penetrated by a snapper, or even a head crab in the vicinity could have attacked them. Regardless of how it happened, one of these workers was infected by the fungal spore of a Xen coffer. Inside of him, the parasitic seedling began to grow. Some time later, the awful aftermath of this deadly infection was discovered by a human scavenger called Larry. The Xenian infestation had spread across into the entire distillery. The force fields had not stopped the spread, and only one of the hazmat workers stood. But he was different. From above, Larry observed this worker, and he called him Jeff. As of now, his real name is unknown. From observation, it appears that everything went wrong just after the parasitic infection entered Jeff's system. As it began to adapt his physiology, Jeff would have noticed this instantly. His body had become host to new life that did not care about what happened to him. His body became bloated and swollen as additional skin grew and absorbed his hazmat suit. His new and old skin hardened and formed a natural protective barrier. His right arm bloated into a battering ram, and Xen coffers grew out of his back. Jeff's co-workers would have of course noticed these changes. However, by the time Larry discovered Jeff, he saw just how aggressive he had become. It is very likely that as each of the hazmat workers discovered the changes that had happened to Jeff, he reacted with rage and took them out. Their bodies scattered all across the distillery. What Jeff had encountered so far would have been terrifying, yet the pain and torture was not over. This parasitic infection still had changes to make to his body. The worst part about this infection occurred on Jeff's head. Through what can only be described as the worst pain imaginable, Jeff's head split into two separate pieces, and in between them formed a mouth with rows of teeth. Inside of this mouth, another mouth formed with another row of teeth. He had essentially become the human equivalent of a Venus flytrap. His new head also resembled the snappers that lined the walls of this graveyard. From this concept art, it is very likely that Jeff was completely aware of what had happened to him, and he was still conscious, but he was no longer in control. The fungal infection was. All he could do was call for help, just like the human hosts that had fallen victim to a head crab. Aware of their situation, unable to do anything about it. All alone, the infection continued to take hold of Jeff as he was used to spread the Xenian infestation. As he wandered the Golden Lion Distillery, his spores spread out into the environment. The quarantine force fields were designed to stop the spread. Jeff, however, still had his keycard on his body that allowed him to wander throughout the region without issue. Although he was in an incredible amount of pain, the changes that the infection had done to his body also left him almost invulnerable to any damage. The pain also kept him in a constant agitated and alert state. His co-workers were dead, but he was not alone. Barnacles formed on the ceiling and head crabs occasionally entered this bleak region. Despite this apparent danger, these were not an issue for him. The mutilation of his head had left him blind, but his hearing had improved exponentially, and even the slightest noise allowed him to pinpoint the location of any intruder in his new home. To protect himself and claim his territory, the fungus evolved its host and gave Jeff the ability to create a dark, toxic substance to launch at any who encountered him. He had become a mobile seed spreader, unable to control his own actions. This poor hazmat worker had just wanted to have an easier life on a Combine-occupied Earth, but fate had given him an existence worse than death. Within the distillery, Larry watched Jeff from above and observed his actions and reaction to the smallest noise. Jeff was in pain and lashed out at anything that came close to him. It was clear that Jeff was a human that had fallen victim to an infection. All Larry had to do was stay quiet in order not to startle this victim of circumstance. Although Larry was very careful to avoid the attention of Jeff, he failed to notice the tongue of a barnacle. To his luck, a young Alyx Vance arrived in the distillery just in time on her way to the vault. In the distance, she heard the rambles of Larry as he contemplated how to get out of this situation. With her great aim, Alyx shot the barnacle and released the scavenger, and in return, he offered her everything he knew about Jeff. In essence, he warned her that Jeff had excellent hearing and would rip her apart if he caught her. As she reached the ground floor of the distillery, Alyx avoided anything that would make a noise, and she also covered her mouth to avoid the inhalation of spores and the chance that they too would turn her into a new host. Alyx had encountered many zombies on her journey through the quarantine zone, but Jeff was different. He was in a lot of pain, but she had to pass him to continue on with her journey. A journey to aid the resistance and strengthen their forces. To navigate the Xenian-infested hallways, Alyx made use of the breakable objects in this enclosed region. This had once been a distillery and had tons of bottles of vodka scattered around. The perfect object to launch into another area to distract Jeff. With each smash, Jeff exploded with rage and explored the area for his prey as Alyx worked her way further in. Eventually, Alyx successfully reached the exit of the distillery and discovered a walk-in trash compactor. With this, she had an idea of how to remove the threat of Jeff. Once again, she led Jeff through the distillery and into the trash compactor. And here, she had a difficult choice to make. This game of cat and mouse had been one of the most stressful and scary experiences Alyx had ever faced, but it was not Jeff's fault. He was also a victim. She could either leave him to live out the rest of his days in the trash compactor, or activate the machine and put him out of his misery. Regardless of the choice she made, Alyx ventured on towards the vault and left her nightmare encounter in the Golden Lion Distillery behind her. This encounter, and generally just the existence of Jeff, opens up the terrifying thought that more of humanity may have fallen victim to this parasitic fungal infection. An infection that transformed a human into a monster, a living human Venus flytrap. Always angry, always agitated. The Stalkers have often been cited as the worst thing that could happen to a human, yet at least they were conditioned to accept their situation, unaware of what they once were. Jeff and anyone else that fell victim to this same infection were aware of what had happened to them, always in pain, truly living a nightmare. Jeff, or whatever his real name was, is just another one of the many victims of the Combine Empire. Although indirect, they put him in the situation he was in. This truly was a fate worse than death. Could Valve build a VR level where sound, a crucial part of virtual reality, directly impacts gameplay? This was the question Valve asked themselves when they were attempting to come up with memorable and interesting moments during the development of Half-Life Alyx. The original concept for this section was not of a zombie, but a robotic-like creature with a machine gun. Essentially, it had the player throw an object into the environment and then the creature would fire in the direction of the sound. As with all Valve features, this idea evolved. At first, it became a robotic zombie with a flamethrower, then a corrupted Combine soldier. Eventually, they decided to go into a more traditional zombie with a series of sound-sensitive tentacles that could attack multiple things at once. In the first year of the development of Half-Life Alyx, this idea of a blind zombie was seen as one of the most exciting gameplay ideas in the process. As Jeff, as we know him, entered development, during playtesting, Valve noticed that the players needed at least some training before they entered the distillery, as they would struggle when they encountered the monster. To do this, Larry was created to offer short pieces of advice as the player navigated through. Throughout Half-Life's 4 years of development, Jeff was in development for 3 of them. Those years absolutely paid off, as Chapter 7 is cited as one of the most memorable parts of the game, a chapter that is worth getting the game for alone. Now, finally, the end of Jeff. His death had several iterations before Valve settled on the trash compactor. The original ending of this chapter would have had Alyx survive her encounter with Jeff, and she would have watched as Jeff was dragged off by antlions. This would have offered the player a glimpse into the predominant enemy in the next level, the zoo. This would have also shown the players that the antlion were also a dangerous enemy to encounter. However, playtesters were noted to have felt empty. Jeff had caused them a ton of stress, and they wanted the opportunity to get their revenge instead of the antlions taking that option away from them. To others, they felt bad for Jeff, and some felt that the arrival of the antlion was random. As he was dragged off by the creatures, it was also left as an assumption that Jeff had died. It removed a sense of closure that the player wanted to feel. So the trash compactor was offered as the final ending, a way for the player to have full control of the situation after their awful encounter with Jeff, and they had the option to either kill him or leave him inside. As I stated in the last section, the Jeff chapter truly is an experience alone that is worth buying Half-Life Alyx for. It was tense, claustrophobic, and the perfectly optimized situation for a virtual reality experience. Jeff was a victim of circumstance, pushed to create a safer environment for humanity and Combine alike, only to be turned into the very thing he was hired to exterminate. On the topic of zombie-like creatures, Jeff has been linked frequently to the cordyceps infection from The Last of Us. I guess they are similar in the way the fungal spores spread into the system, grow, and then control the host. He also appears to be a mix between the clickers and bloaters. I hated the clickers. It has also been noted that Jeff shares a similarity to the Boomers from the Left 4 Dead series, another great zombie series also created by Valve. With the Fall of Jeff section, I also did not want to go through that chapter beat by beat on how the player navigates Jeff, how the player has to use the valve without triggering Jeff, or how you lock him in the fridge and then have to let him out, or the elevator sequence. I wanted to just tell the story and maybe push people to go back and play the chapter again. It is also now a lot easier to play through the game for anyone. The Half-Life Alyx No VR mod is incredible. You can play through the whole game without a headset. This isn't sponsored, I just wanted to shout them out because they have made something incredible there. I have been playing Half-Life Alyx No VR a lot lately, and although it completely changes the way you experience Jeff on a 2D screen, it is still scary and it is still fun. Having actually planned ahead topics and stayed on track for the past few weeks, I'm so happy to actually be working on a topic for Halloween. Jeff seemed fitting. He was a tragic story that was corrupted and entered a world of pain. After I completed the Jeff chapter, and every time I have completed it since, I have always put him out of his misery. He was a person that wanted a better life. I believe he was aware of his situation, even in his aggressive state thanks to the concept art. It was the kind thing to do to just end him. Saying that, I am curious to know what you thought about this chapter in its entirety and how you reacted to Jeff and Larry. This was everything I wanted to cover this week. I do have another creepy, uncomfortable topic next week for a brand new game. The topic has been requested often and it seems to be the perfect time to explore it. That was everything I wanted to say really, so this was the lore and story behind Jeff in Half-Life Alyx. If you enjoyed this, then please leave a like, drop a comment below and even share it with another Half-Life fan. If you disagreed or genuinely disliked this, then also let me know in the comments and leave a dislike. I appreciate you watching regardless of how you felt about it. Subscribe for more content like this too. As always, I would like to thank my amazing gold tier patrons and channel members who got access to this video a little bit early. The best resistance fighters you could ask for. Jonas, Lewis, Queen Arby, Flo for the Dragon, Chicken Guy 791, Ruben Mendoza, Duke, Toadnut, Oren X, Azu, Karatana, AJ, Verona, Comfy, BG Games, Apravis, and Arnis. Now, what did you think of this lore? Did you keep Jeff alive or kill him? And what would you like me to cover next? This is where our story ends. Check back next week for a new one.